Hello and welcome back to Franklin Covey's twice weekly podcast on leadership with Scott Miller, where for 6 years and nearly 450 episodes, every Tuesday and Friday, I have the distinct honor on behalf of Franklin Covey of interviewing some of the most renowned thought leaders, creators, artists, starters, finishers, entrepreneurs, leaders in the world. This is a leadership podcast, but we talk about all things adjacent to leadership: marketing, business development, sales, strategy, relationships, culture, processes, systems, strategies, you name it. Each week on Tuesdays and Fridays, we like to interview people that can make you a better leader, whether that is formal or informal, to have you become more effective in your life. Franklin Covey, of course, is the world's most trusted leadership company, co-founded by the seminal author, Dr. Stephen R. Covey, who 40 years ago penned what is arguably the world's most influential book on personal development, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In his legacy of having an abundance mentality, we love shining our uber bright spotlight onto people who have the same values, the same principles, the same mission as Franklin Covey. In fact, today's guest is Reid. He is a sought-after author, coach, speaker, practitioner. He is the author and co-creator of the book, The Trust Transformation: Transform Your Health, Wellbeing, and Performance Through the Power of Trust. Roy, welcome to On Leadership.
Thank you, Scott. It's an honor to be here.
Okay, it's an honor to interview you because, we are passionate about the topic of trust. Dr. Covey's eldest son, Stephen M. R. Covey, is a leader, iconic leader in the industry. He, of course, wrote the seminal book, The Speed of Trust, that I know you have read and have modeled, of course, much of your life and principles on. And you, too, have dedicated much of your career as an expert on leadership and communication and building a culture of trust. You also have a very complementary approach to much of what Franklin Covey teaches. However, you take it also a little broader in terms of health and well-being, not just in performance. I want to start first because I've been a fan and follower of yours for many years. I have followed your journey both professionally and personally, and you experienced something that we both hope no one else will, although there was an upside in a personal setback you had, because I watch your sort of joie de vivre, your zest for living every day. Will you start, Roy, and maybe start the day something pretty significant happened in your life, and how has that had an impact on you, and how can it inspire others?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to share this story. It was just over 5 years ago, or 1,958 days, if I get it right. My wife and I were enjoying a regular Friday evening, and in the middle of the night, I woke up with the worst pain I'd ever felt, got rushed to the emergency room, and when they figured out what it was, an aortic dissection, in other words, my heart was splitting open, they flew me into the Advent Health's large hospital downtown, and for 6 hours, surgeons worked on essentially replacing the entire upper arch of my aorta. And when I talked to healthcare givers about this condition, they informed me that it's really a fortunate thing that I got it when I got it and where I got it, because there's about a 2 to 5% chance of survival. In fact, it was so bad they put me in a coma for a week and kept me in a hospital for a month. But as I tell people, my story is one of mission, medicine, and miracles. And I woke up with all my faculties, began my healing journey, which continues to this day.
Roy, this may sound trite or like a cliche. I don't mean it to be. Your life has probably been transformed since then. I'm sure you're not doing everything perfect like we think we will if we're given another chance. But what has changed in your life since this literally life or death scenario?
Scott, when you face your mortality, things do change. I'll tell you that while I was in that coma, it looked like I was inactive and sleeping to the outside world. A lot of things were processing on the inside world. When I woke up, there's a keen recognition that you could do things so much better. You could be such a better human being, father, husband, son in what you do. And so a lot of my routines have changed. A lot of the outlook that I have is much bigger, recognizing that I was spared and saved and perhaps preserved for a reason. to help more people understand how they can take charge of their life, build stronger, better, and more fulfilling relationships in what they do. But I get up in the morning early and get my cardio in, as you might imagine. Take a lot more time to reflect on the things that I know are going to make me a better person in every capacity of my life. And I started to do some new things like pursue the opportunities to not compete necessarily, but to complete a half marathon. And did that within the first year and continue to do that 2 to 3 times a year, and other 5Ks and programs, largely with my wife, who enjoys spending that time with me as well.
Again, I'm going to guess one of the takeaways of a life or death health incident is that you don't sweat the small stuff. I'm guessing you care, but you're not fixated on who's going to win the election. I'm guessing you care, but you're not fixated on your 401k or your income. I mean, we all care about those things, but I'm guessing it's a valuable reset to put everything in perspective. Am I right?
You're absolutely right. In fact, when I think about one of the things that has become completely wired into the DNA of my week, I look at where I'm spending intentional and meaningful time with people more than anything else. For instance, my family has a commitment on Sundays that we're going to do everything in our power to have a meal together on that day, because it's in those times where we can reflect and engage with one another, again, very intentionally, which speaks to the core meaning of the book and the idea that when we improve our relationships, everything in life gets better.
Roy, this book you have co-authored with a colleague is called The Trust Transformation. Transform your health, well-being, and performance. And I'm going to kind of move around today to have you remind us about the power of trust and how transformative it can be. You talk about how there are some fundamental truths about trust that you've developed and, if you will, codified. Trust must be earned. Trust is foundational to reputation and brand. Trust contributes to our perception of competence and integrity. Trust is the benefit of the doubt when times are difficult. And then you also write that trust is your responsibility. And that one was kind of interesting and new to me. Riff on that, if you will, that trust, in fact, is not someone else's responsibility, it's yours.
One of the things that we put together in the book, and I have to give credit to Dr. O'Mara Mansfield, my co-author and partner in crime throughout this journey, is a set of guiding principles. As I've looked at and experienced working with people on a fairly regular basis now since early in my career, I found that if you took responsibility for the relationship, in other words, you look at relationships more than transactional, you look at them as much deeper engagements with people. And if you take responsibility for it, you find that even if you don't succeed in getting to the place that you intend to, the impact both on you, the other person, and those around you have a significant meaning. And it impacts people in a way that transforms what's happening in their lives.
Roy, further, you spent some time talking about what you and your co-author identify as the 4 kinds of relationships in our lives: advocates, allies, agnostics, and adversaries. Will you speak to each of those and talk about how important it is or how unimportant it is, maybe to recognize them or focus on them, and where to spend your time building trust? First, talk about advocates.
You bet. First thing to keep in mind about how we characterize your relationships is that this is a filter for condition and not good or bad, because you can find good and bad in each of these different characteristics of a relationship. But your advocates are pretty much what you might imagine. These are the people that at the drop of a hat are there for you. They probably know before you do that you might have a problem and are willing and able to speak into it and support you in ways that others may not have that intimate understanding or connection with you yet. Allies are sort of that next area where there's significant trust, people that align with you, are on the same journey perhaps with you, see life very much the same way that you do, and engage with you with little or no effort. Agnostics represent that large group of people that we don't know, or maybe new to us or new to our organization, that it's incumbent now to figure out on our end, how do we move them into one of those other areas? And adversaries are just like it sounds. There are people in our lives that we just find ourselves maybe at odds with on a regular basis. Perhaps trust has been broken, needs to be rebuilt, or it could be a less difficult thing in sort of characterized as a competitor, somewhere in the marketplace where you can't necessarily give them certain things that you would give others, but you have a good relationship with them, but they're still in that adversarial space.
You propose in the book that these are the 4 types of relationships, if you will, and you argue that trust and relationships are intertwined, they're interdependent. This, of course, makes sense. Let's riff on that. I would argue that everybody is in the same business, right? They're in the business of relationships, whether you're providing healthcare, whether you're providing technology equipment or selling tulips or lingerie, doesn't matter what it is, everyone is in the same business. All of us need to be sophisticating, maturing, and growing our ability to cultivate great relationships. But I think it's, easier said than done. I mean, quite frankly, I'm not that great at it. I have a little bit of anxiety. I'm kind of impulsive. I have a stutter. I live in the future. I like to be in momentum. These are not qualities for a person who develops great relationships. I have lots of qualities, but they don't always develop in deep relationships. It requires patience to be married to me. It requires a lot of insight and wisdom to be my friend. There's an upside to being my friend, but I'll be the first to confess, one of my top 5 talents, I think one of my key talents is winning people over, like woo, right, as in the Gallup. But I'm not so sure that I'm naturally great at developing relationships, and that seems pretty foundational when you recognize that trust and relationships are intertwined. How would you opine or disagree or answer the interplay between great relationships and being good at developing them and maintaining them, and the role that trust plays in that?
So one of the things that we do in the book and in the training program that goes with this is all based on an evidence-based training program that we developed and launched at Advent Health, is that there are certain qualities that we look at to want to trust somebody. The idea of being trustworthy, which is not trusted, but it's congratulations, you've earned the right to be trusted. And the idea of authenticity is the second one. And it's within that authenticity area, Scott, that I would open up the idea that building relationships requires having clarity on what that relationship should be and looks like, having respect for the other person and who they are, and being present in their lives in different ways. And some people take that differently, but it's really the idea of scheduling and making time for them for what's important. And if we understand the clarity of that relationship, what it means, what it's about, what its boundaries are, and how that looks, we have a better understanding of how to engage, how to be present, and how to really focus on building that relationship. One of the key foundations that informs this that we talk about is that we find that trust is built on kind of 2 big buckets. One is emotion and the other experience. And that's what we navigate in and out of as we foster and build our relationships.
Such a valuable insight. I was giving a keynote just yesterday where I was reinforcing the fact that rarely are we experienced the way we think we are, right? And my intention might be to give you great feedback, and you may see it as eviscerating or cutting. And I think it's so important to increase our self-awareness as we think about, the kind of emotions we express and receive and the kind of experience we create with those around us. Great reminders. You talk about there are 4 guiding principles in the book. Take responsibility for your relationships, build trust from the inside out, keep your promises and communicate consistently. And then the 4th one I really found interesting, be a good steward of your trust. Riff on that. Number 4, be a good steward of your trust. What does that mean?
That's a great question, and it is one that we look at from really two angles. The first angle is that when we steward or give our trust to other people, who are we giving it to? Who are we surrounding ourselves with? The saying goes that you become the 5 people that you hang out with the most. Well, those are the people that you are likely pouring and giving the trust that you have into them, in return growing and learning and building from that. But the flip side is this. Trust in the end is that gift that people give us for being trustworthy, authentic, and dependable. And when we have that, we have influence. And so what do you do with that? How do you spend that capital on the things that you are trying to do? Is it helping others? Is it building a better community? Or is it some selfish thing that you just continue to take and not give? And so being a steward is both the idea of caring for that trust that you're giving others, but also taking that trust that people give you and doing the right thing with it.
Roy, I'm going to guess for most of us, with the exception of some extreme outliers, trust can be established or reestablished even when it's broken. Not always, but often, depending upon the gravity of the breach of trust, right, of the violation. And one thing I find often with leaders who I might be speaking with or coaching is that these leaders want to get better at delivering feedback to their team members. But perhaps the team members aren't taking it very seriously because the leader has no credibility, the leader has broken trust, either in promising an increase in pay, not delivering, or a promotion or a movement or something. And you kind of can't claw your way back, right? If you want people to respect you, to follow you, to accept perhaps well-intended feedback you have on their blind spots, you have to have previously developed and carefully cultivated trust in their currency. It's often not too late, but maybe remind everybody just how undeniably important it is to be cultivating a reputation of trust, because you're going to need to cash in on it sooner or later.
Yeah. Scott, when I talk to people, and this story's in the book, I wear a simple little bracelet every day. And my daughter made this bracelet. She made it when she was 5 years old. She's now 22 and navigating her way through college. But I came home this Friday night, and Faith had turned my dining room into a bracelet factory. And as excited as she might be, she ran to the door, handed me the bracelet, and said, "Daddy, will you wear it?" And I've said, "Of course I will." It was Memorial Day weekend, so we went to the picnic and the mall and the movies, and everywhere we went became show and tell. She liked to show it off and tell everybody about every aspect of what went into making the bracelet. Well, come Tuesday morning, it was a holiday weekend, and back then, you might recall this, I think we're right around the same age. I actually had to put a suit and tie on to go to work. There was a dress code at the client's office that I had to go visit that day. And I put the bracelet on the dresser, went on to work, and I get home that night, and she's still working at these bracelets, and I'm just thinking to myself, I've only got so much arm to give to your cause. Well, she comes in the kitchen with another bracelet, and she looks at me and says, "Daddy, if you didn't like the other bracelet, will you wear this one?" And that was a humbling moment for me. And it's become a consistent thing that I share with people, because I went back in the bedroom and I put the bracelet on, and I wear it every day for 2 reasons. 1, I told her I would. And 2, and what I hope everyone just takes away from this conversation, from reading the book or going through the course, we need to remember that it's every little thing that we say or do that's either building the trust with the people around us or tearing it down. So we have to be mindful and intentional about those words to build that, as Dr. Covey writes in his book, that emotional bank account with people, so that we have a net gain in that bank account and not a net loss.
Well, beautifully said, right? We build or destroy trust in every interaction. In every text, in every email, in every social post, in every quick passing in the hallway, in every commitment made or not made or violated. I mean, you build and destroy trust based on who you put in to the CC or BCC in an email.
I tell people the passing comment that you make could be the most important thing that somebody hears that day. And there's a lot of weight in that.
Or the passing comment might be the key ingredient they use to assess your reputation, your brand, your
That's
trustworthiness
exactly right.
as well too, right? I mean, one thing I've learned late in life, Roy, is the impact of words, and I should be more judicious with them. Tell us, in your title, you and your co-author talk about how the trust transformation impacts your own health and well-being. You don't just write about organizational trust or societal trust. You talk about in your life outside of your professional career. Take that wherever you'd like to go. How do the components of a trust transformation really bring congruency in your broader life?
I'll look at it from two angles. One, on the emotional and perhaps mental side of the equation. When we have high trust in our relationships, we're able to contend with, deal with, confront, and go through very difficult situations because we have that emotional support that we get from other people. And there's a layer of confidence that is built within us when we learn to trust ourselves by being and leaning into the ideas of integrity and focus and those things that make up that concept of being trustworthy. But even on the physical side, the research that we did and that we looked at, and having Dr. Mansfield as a co-author in this was just so insightful to be able to look at studies that showed that people who had trust, had better relationships in their lives, that does manifest into the physical health and well-being that we experience, and that there were less reported incidents of certain things that people talk about on a regular basis, and those outcomes were very encouraging for us, and we see it in the people that go through the program.
What do you find that most leaders or individual contributors, that matter, get wrong? They underestimate, they shortcut, they lack the understanding of the gravity of the contributors for what you call as a trust transformation. I ask this for me as well too, is because we all create shortcuts, we all have biases, we all have attempts to get as much for as little. It doesn't mean we're a bad person, it means we're a person, quite frankly. Remind us of some of the danger spots.
The first one, and one of the things that really inspired me early on to look into this is the assumption of trust. Just assuming that either by your rank or your authority or your company's position in a community or in an industry, that people just trust you for that without really diving into and asking questions about why and about if that exists. And so in the condition I was in when I originally began putting this together 15 or 20 years ago, I was leading an agency. I was a partner in a PR firm, and a lot of our clients were dealing with issues in crisis management. And our job was to help them go navigate it. And I began to see a trend that those companies who were very intentional about this idea fared so much better throughout the crisis and in the outcomes than those who had to essentially build from the beginning the trust that they assumed had been there before the crisis. And so it goes again back to that investment within yourself and within your organization to assure that you have that relationship with yourself, your team members, your customers, your community, and others.
Roy, much of your professional career has been in the healthcare industry. You've had several senior organizational positions, and I know you as an expert communicator, or at least an expert in communication. All of us have challenges with our communication. You talk about, with your co-author in the book, ways to become a better communicator, become a good listener, ask clarifying questions, notice nonverbal communication, be clear and concise, be honest, show empathy, focus on the positive. As we're kind of winding up our discussion today, there's no question the connection between building trust with others and your ability to communicate in a trustworthy way. When you see a breakdown between trust and relationships, I'm going to guess it always comes back somehow to how it was communicated, to intentions. People absent facts make stuff up, right? It's a famous PR principle. Where does it go wrong? When trust is broken because communication was poor, over your many-year career as a leader, as a coach, an advisor, an author. What do people tend to underestimate in terms of the connection between trust and communication?
That's a great question, and I'll use a brief story to illustrate it. I was in a leadership role in public relations in one of the hospitals I worked for, and we were going through budget time, and I asked the question of my colleagues and my boss around the table, hey, what does the chief operating officer see about this? What are his priorities on it? And essentially the answer I got back was, he doesn't understand what we do, so we really don't get any feedback. Well, obviously there's a broken trust in that. There's a broken communications in that. And so I volunteered to go meet with him. I called his office. We scheduled a meeting. I got 30 minutes on the calendar for that meeting. He was running late, so we had 10 minutes, just enough time for me to say, hey, I'm Roy. I'm your new director of PR and communications. Have a nice day. But what happened after that, Scott, was I called back and made a follow-up to that, and another follow-up. And what Don began to recognize was I was committed to a communications discipline with him that would allow him to find the value in what I could do, find the value in what my team could do, find the value in what our department could do for the organization. And we began to work on things in a much deeper, richer, meaningful, productive, and effective way to find ways to do things. And I would just encourage people, if you assume something about someone but haven't yet engaged with them in a meaningful way, then you're missing out on what could be and what vision and what could manifest from a much more productive relationship there.
Roy, I try to make these conversations, these podcast interviews, as practical as possible. When you think of the most trusted people you have worked with, what are the commonalities? What is it that the people that have earned the most trust, regardless of perhaps of their education or nuance or speciality or their net worth or how good looking they are, the outliers, no connection to being trustworthy and good looking.
Thank God.
For me, what are the top 3 or 4 behaviors that are consistent in the most trusted people that anybody can learn and integrate into their lives? Let's end there.
I'm going to go back to my personal story, my journey, because the real outcome was to look around and ask the very question that you just asked me. The people that I respected most, that I trust the most, who exude that highest level of leadership, what do they do? And I determined there were 4 things that I wanted to live my life by as a result of that, and as a result of reflecting on what matters most. And consistently, I find it's with people who love people, who really live by gratitude. They're grateful for the things that they have and the people that they either get to serve or they work with. They give generously, not necessarily of their money, but of themselves, of their time, of what they do have. And lastly, they set out to make a difference. And if you live by those 4 principles, I think that you'll find that life presents itself with so much more and so much more blessings that you'll experience.
Hey, I'm going to challenge you, because perhaps I might have misunderstood. Your first was that they love people. I know a lot of people who don't love people. They've had some trauma, they are introverted, they may have some anxiety, they may just be tired, right? But they're abundant, they're grateful, they're generous. When you say a condition of being trusted is you love people, expand on that a little bit so I understand that right.
Yeah, and it's important to understand that we look at that through the lens of a very broad idea, right? You don't have to necessarily like the people that you engage with on a regular basis, but love is a different layer of that, Scott. It says that I'm going to engage with you with the highest level of respect. I'm going to take into consideration what you've been through, because you're absolutely right. We all show up with different wiring, with different experience, with different influences. And so if we're able to take that step back through that lens of love, it allows us to not necessarily accept what's there, but to at least embrace the human that's there and really look to serve them and work with them in the most productive way.
Okay, final takeaway. What's the single most important behavior if someone is trying to be trusted? Recognize there's all kinds of situations and scenarios and circumstances and background and history and baggage and trauma. If you had to boil it down to one thing everyone should be more thoughtful of, is it making and keeping commitments? Is it clarifying expectations? Is it saying no? Is it listening better? Like, what's the one thing, Roy, that will help everybody build trust in a transformative way?
Take a step back, recognize it's not all about you, and be intentional with the engagement you have with others.
Well, now you tell me. That would have been helpful 30 years ago. Roy Reid, co-author of the book, The Trust Transformation, Transform Your Health, Wellbeing, and Performance Through the Power of Trust. Delighted to talk to you today. Great remembrance of a lot of great principles. Glad you are alive. Glad you are here. And like you, I need to do a better job of not sweating the small stuff. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation on leadership.